At 6:47 this morning, while America slept, the fortress collapsed, not with explosions, not with headlines, with 3 signatures on a single document. And in the 11 hours since, something is happening inside Trump's inner circle that no one is talking about publicly. Something that changes everything. Stay with me, because what I am about to show you is not just about one court ruling. It is about watching a power structure disintegrate in real time. I need you to do something right now before we go any further. Subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell, because what I am tracking is not just the public court documents. It is the private conversations, the closed-door meetings, the panic spreading through Trump's legal team that they are desperately trying to hide from you. The D.C. Circuit did not just rule against Trump this morning. They obliterated every single legal argument his team has been building for 18 months. But here is what you will not hear on cable news. This ruling triggered something else, something that has been building for weeks behind the scenes, and sources are telling me it is about to break wide open. Let me give you the numbers that matter. Filed 11 p.m. last night. Response 6:07 a.m. this morning. Time elapsed less than 8 hours. Pages 407. Judges voting against Trump 3. Judges voting for Trump 0. Dissenting opinions none. Word that appeared 14 times unprecedented. When a federal appeals court moves that fast, it means one thing. This was not even a close call. But it is not just the speed, it is the language. Listen to this quote from the ruling. Former President Trump's alleged efforts to remain in power despite losing the 2020 election were unprecedented in our nation's history. Do you hear what they are saying? Not questionable tactics, not constitutional concerns. Unprecedented. That word is doing enormous legal work. It is the court saying this is not a gray area. This is not a novel legal question requiring careful balancing. This is a former president who allegedly tried to overturn an election, and no version of immunity was ever designed to protect that. The court issued 4 devastating holdings. 1, complete rejection of absolute immunity. Trump's lawyers argued he could not be prosecuted for any official act. The court said that is not how this works. 2, his actions were private, not official. Trying to overturn an election, that is not presidential business. That is personal. 3, the charges can survive appeal. This was not a technicality. The court looked at the substance and said these charges are legitimate, for this framework applies to every pending case. Georgia, Florida, New York, every single one. This is not just about D.C. This is the entire legal strategy collapsing simultaneously. And that is when the phone call started. Here is what was supposed to happen. Trump's team files emergency stay with Supreme Court. Conservative justices issue temporary hold. Case gets delayed for months, maybe years. That is the playbook. That is what worked before. But here is what is actually happening. Nothing. Absolute radio silence from the Supreme Court, not from the liberal justices. I am talking about the conservatives, Roberts, Alito, Thomas, the 3 justices Trump himself appointed, Kavanaugh, Gorsuch, Barrett, nothing. Now, I need to be careful here, because I am about to tell you something. I heard from 2 separate sources inside Washington legal circles, and I cannot name them, but I can tell you this. Off the record, Supreme Court clerks are saying the justices looked at this case and decided it was not worth the institutional cost. Let me translate that. The Supreme Court does not want to be the institution that shields a former president from prosecution for trying to overturn an election. They saw what the D.C. Circuit wrote. They saw the evidence. They saw the facts. And they made a calculation. Protecting Trump here would permanently damage the court's credibility. Think about what that means. Trump appointed 3 of these justices. He expects loyalty, and they are not giving it to him. You want proof this is bad for Trump? Listen to what Lindsey Graham said yesterday. If the Supreme Court does not intervene, we could be looking at a criminally convicted nominee in 2024. That is Lindsey Graham, one of Trump's most loyal defenders. And he is not attacking the ruling. He is not calling it rigged. He is conceding the possibility of conviction. Read between those lines. That is panic. But the Supreme Court silence is not the real story. The real story is what happened after the ruling inside Trump Tower, inside the campaign, inside the legal team. That is where this gets interesting. Here is what I have pieced together from multiple sources. Within 90 minutes of the ruling, Trump's senior legal team was on an emergency conference call. Not just the lawyers, campaign strategists, fundraising directors, RNC officials. And according to someone who was on that call, and I am protecting this source because their job depends on it, the meeting did not go well. Trump wanted to issue a statement calling the judges Obama hacks and suggesting they should be impeached. His lawyers told him that would be witness intimidation. Trump asked if he could pardon himself if he wins in 2024. His lawyers told him that would not help with state charges. Trump then allegedly said, and I am quoting my source here, "Then what the am I paying you for?" 3 people hung up, just disconnected from the call mid-zero meeting. Now, this next part is crucial, so stay with me. Starting around 10 a.m. this morning, something unusual started happening. Campaign staffers, junior level, not the big names, started updating their LinkedIn profiles. Now, that might not sound like much, but in political campaigns, that is a signal. It means I am looking for a way out. One source told me that by noon, at least 7 staffers had either updated LinkedIn or reached out to recruiters. These are not people at the top. These are the people who book travel, manage field operations, coordinate events, the machine, and they are starting to jump ship. Why? Because they can read a calendar. They understand that if their candidate gets convicted before the election, their resumes get permanently associated with a convicted felon. That is not a conspiracy theory. That is career math, and the smart ones are doing that math right now. But staffers leaving, that is just noise. What happened with the lawyers? That is the signal. I am about to tell you something that has not been widely reported yet. 2 of Trump's attorneys, I am not naming them because this has not been confirmed publicly, have quietly begun reaching out to malpractice insurance carriers. Why would they do that? Because if they continue representing a client who is about to be convicted, and if that conviction happens because the client ignored their legal advice and kept posting on social media, they could be personally liable. Malpractice claims, bar complaints, the whole thing. One legal analyst I spoke with put it this way: these lawyers are starting to realize they might be on the Titanic and they are looking for lifeboats. Now, I want to show you something that confirms this pattern because it is not just the legal team. The money is moving too. And when the money moves, that is when you know it is real. Let me show you what the FEC filings reveal. In the last quarter, Trump's PAC spent $3.7 million on legal fees. That is normal for someone facing multiple indictments. But here is what is not normal. In the 48 hours after this ruling, 2 major donors, I cannot name them, but combined, they have given over $15 million to Trump-aligned PACs. Both called their lawyers asking about clawback provisions. Clawback provisions. That is legal language for "can I get my money back?" These are not small donors. These are the people who fund the entire operation, and they are asking if they can pull out. That is not a vote of confidence. That is the exact opposite. But the real financial crisis is happening at the RNC. Republican National Committee has been covering some of Trump's legal bills. Not all, but some. And according to sources, there was a conference call yesterday between RNC leadership and major Republican mega donors. The question on that call: if Trump gets convicted before the convention, can we still nominate him? The answer legally is yes. But practically, here is what one mega donor allegedly said on that call: I am not writing another check to defend a convicted felon. I do not care if he is the nominee or not. Now, the RNC cannot publicly distance themselves from Trump. Not yet. The base would revolt. But privately, they are doing the math. And that math says if conviction happens before November, down 0 ballot, Republicans get slaughtered. House candidates, Senate candidates, state races, everyone drowns. So they are quietly, carefully starting to build alternative options. Which brings us to the elephant in the room, the Republican Party itself. Because what is happening inside the GOP right now is not just disagreement. It is an organized, deliberate revolt, and it started weeks before this ruling. Let me show you. Let us talk about who is actually breaking ranks. Not the usual suspects, not the Lincoln Project crowd. I am talking about Republicans who defended Trump through 2 impeachments. Mike Lawler, New York, defended Trump. Now, cause sponsoring impeachment articles. Don Bacon, Nebraska, voted against impeachment twice, now calling today's ruling legally sound. These are not liberals. These are Republicans from swing districts, and they are reading the same polls you can read. 32% of Republicans say they will not support Trump if he is convicted. That number makes him unelectable in a general election. And these Republicans are not stupid. They understand that if Trump is at the top of the ticket as a convicted felon, they lose their seats. So they are jumping, and every time one jumps, it makes the next jump easier. But that is the House. Let us talk about the Senate, because that is where it gets really interesting. There are 23 Republican senators up for re-election in 2024 and 2026. 7 of them are in states Biden won or came within 3 points. Those 7 senators are doing political survival math right now, and here's what that math looks like. If Trump is convicted in March, the trial is on every screen in America. Mike Pence testifies against him. Mark Meadows testifies against him. His own White House counsel testifies against him. The January 6th footage plays on loop. By the time November comes, Trump is toxic, and anyone who defended him shares that toxicity. So what are these senators doing? They are creating distance quietly, carefully. They are not attacking Trump directly. That is still politically dangerous, but they are not defending him either. Watch the language. I have not followed the case closely. I will let the courts decide. I am focused on my state, not national politics. That is code. That is Republican senators saying, I am not going down with this ship. One source told me, and I cannot verify this independently, that there is a private WhatsApp group of moderate Republican senators, and they are discussing what happens if Trump is convicted before the convention. Can they block his nomination? Can they force him to withdraw? Can they run someone else? These conversations are happening right now behind closed doors. Now, all of that is politics. But let me bring this back to the law, because while Republicans are calculating, prosecutors are moving, and the timeline they are operating on, it is faster than anyone expected. Let me walk you through what happens next. Exact dates, exact timeline. The Speedy Trial Act requires a trial to begin within 70 days once the immunity question is resolved. Today's ruling essentially resolved it, which means the clock starts now. Here's what that looks like. Day 1. Today, ruling issued. Day 14, February 12th, D.C. Circuit issues full written opinion. Day 28, February 26th, deadline for Supreme Court emergency stay. Day 45, March 14th, pretrial motions finalized. Day 70, April 17th, trial must begin. Unless the Supreme Court intervenes, which they have shown zero interest in doing, this timeline is locked, immovable. And April is before the Republican National Convention. Now, I need you to understand what this timeline means practically. If trial begins in April, it will run through May, possibly into June. That is right in the middle of primary season. Trump will be sitting in a D.C. courtroom while his opponents are campaigning. He cannot attend rallies. He cannot do fundraisers. He cannot run attack ads from the defendant's table. And here is the kicker. If conviction happens in May or June, sentencing typically follows within 60 to 90 days. That puts sentencing in July or August, right before the convention. The Republican Party would be nominating someone who has been convicted and is awaiting sentencing. Let that sink in. Now, Trump's team understands all of this, which is why their strategy has shifted. They are not trying to win in court anymore. They are trying to delay until after the election, and they are willing to do anything to make that happen. Which brings me to the most dangerous part of all of this, because Trump is not just fighting in court. He is signaling to his supporters, and those signals are being taken seriously by people who have the capacity for violence. This is where it gets genuinely dangerous. Let me read you something Trump posted this morning. If these witch hunts do not stop, our country will face problems the likes of which we have never seen. Now, his defenders will say that is just rhetoric, just political speech. But let me tell you what law enforcement is saying. That is a threat. The FBI has elevated threat assessments around the D.C. courthouse. U.S. Marshals have enhanced security for prosecutors, witnesses, and Judge Chutan herself. Capitol Police are on high alert. These agencies do not do this because of rhetoric. They do this because they have intelligence suggesting the threat is real. We have seen this pattern before. For weeks before January 6th, Trump posted about fighting like hell, about taking our country back, about the election being stolen. And we know what happened. We watched police officers beaten with flagpoles. We watched windows shattered and chambers breached. We watched American democracy come within minutes of complete collapse. That was over an election he lost. This is about him potentially going to prison. Think about how much more desperate that makes him. Think about how much more dangerous that makes this moment. Law enforcement is thinking about it. They are preparing for the possibility that if conviction happens, Trump calls for mass demonstrations in D.C. And if those demonstrations turn violent, if armed supporters decide to protect him, we are not talking about cable news drama anymore. We are talking about the potential for Americans killing Americans over a disputed conviction. That is not hyperbole. That is the security briefings happening right now in Washington. Now, I have given you the domestic picture, but there is one more layer you need to understand, because America's adversaries are watching all of this, and they are making calculations of their own. I want to read you something that appeared in The Economist yesterday. A former American president facing criminal prosecution for attempting to overturn an election is unprecedented in any stable democracy. That is not an American publication. That is London. Let me tell you what I am hearing from sources in European diplomatic circles. Allies are genuinely alarmed, not because they care about American partisan politics, but because the spectacle of a former president calling for armed resistance while facing criminal charges undermines faith in American institutions. If America cannot hold its own leaders accountable without threatening civil unrest, if American democracy is that fragile, then how reliable is American leadership on the global stage? That is the question being asked in Berlin, Paris, London, Tokyo. And it is a fair question, but our adversaries, they are asking different questions. China is watching this and seeing opportunity. If America is consumed by internal political chaos, now is the time to pressure Taiwan. Russia is watching and calculating whether NATO unity will hold. If America is distracted, Iran is watching and accelerating its nuclear program. These are not conspiracy theories. This is basic geopolitical strategy. Adversaries probe when they see weakness. And right now, America looks weak. Not militarily, not economically. Institutionally, our democracy looks vulnerable, and vulnerability invites aggression. One senior State Department official told me off the record, "We are fielding calls from allied ambassadors asking if America is stable." That is not a question we should be having to answer, but we are answering it because the question is legitimate. Okay. I have laid out the legal collapse, the political fracture, the security threat, the international fallout. But there's one more thing, the thing cable news will not tell you, the thing that ties all of this together, and it is the most important part. Here is what all of this is actually about. Not Trump, not one court case, not one election. It is about whether the rules that govern power are stronger than the individuals who temporarily hold it. Every democracy faces this question. Eventually, a leader comes along who believes the rules do not apply to them, who treats every limit as an obstacle, who sees the Constitution as a suggestion rather than a constraint. When that happens, the system faces a choice. It can bend, it can break, or it can hold. Right now, we are watching America's system get tested in real time. And here's what you will not hear on cable news. The system is holding. Not perfectly, not quickly, not as firmly as we would like, but it is holding. 3 judges issued a unanimous ruling. The Supreme Court is staying out of it. Republican senators are quietly distancing themselves. Campaign staffers are updating LinkedIn. Donors are asking about clawbacks. These are all small signs, individual cracks, but together they form a pattern. The fortress is collapsing, not because of some grand conspiracy, not because of the deep state, but because institutions, imperfect, slow, frustrating institutions, are doing what they were designed to do. They are constraining power. And the person who has been testing those constraints for years is finally hitting the limits. Now, let me tell you the part that is being actively suppressed. I have spoken to 3 different sources, 2 inside Republican political operations, 1 inside the legal team, and all 3 confirm the same thing. There is a coordinated effort to prepare for Trump's conviction, not to prevent it, to prepare for it. They are wargaming scenarios. Does he drop out? Does the RNC force a contested convention? Do they run him anyway and hope for sympathy votes? And these conversations are happening right now among people at the highest levels of Republican politics, and they are not sharing this publicly because it would enrage the base. But privately, they are treating conviction as inevitable. They are not asking if anymore. They are asking when and what happens next. That should tell you everything you need to know about where this is heading. All right, let me bring this home because I need you to understand what the next 70 days mean. Not just for Trump, for all of us. Here is where we are. A unanimous 3-judge panel has rejected Trump's immunity claims. The Supreme Court is staying silent. A 70-a-day countdown to trial has begun. Inside Trump's operation, people are jumping ship. Donors are pulling back. Republican senators are distancing themselves. Law enforcement is preparing for potential violence. Our allies are questioning American stability. Our adversaries are probing for weakness. And behind closed doors, even Trump's own team is preparing for conviction. This is not just a legal story. It is not just a political story. This is a test of whether American democracy can hold a powerful person accountable without tearing itself apart. And over the next 70 days, we are going to find out the answer. Will the institutions hold? Will the violence materialize? Will Republicans break completely? Will Trump be convicted before the election? We do not know yet, but we are about to find out. I am going to be tracking every single development as it happens, every court filing, every defection, every threat, every poll, and I need you to be here for it. Subscribe to this channel right now. Hit that notification bell because when something breaks, and something will break, I will have the analysis here before cable news even understands what happened. Share this video with anyone who needs to understand what is actually happening. Drop a comment. Do you think Trump gets convicted before the election, or does he find a way to delay past November? I genuinely want to know what you are thinking, and I will see you in the next breakdown because this story is just getting started. The fortress is collapsing, and we are watching it happen in real all.